I'd like to tell you a story. And it's a story that's a bit absurd. It's a bit insightful, I think. It's one that I hope that you get something from, at the very least, a laugh at my expense. But it's a story about how sometimes on this spiritual path, there are things that we need to learn that we can't get from a book or from sitting down and going inside, that we have to get from experience. And there's no other way to learn this thing that we need to learn. And it's a story about a time that I needed to learn something in a big way because my head was so hard. And honestly, I just, when we start out on this path, we can be so full of mistaken ideas of what it is to be a spiritual practitioner, what it is to make spiritual progress, what it is to become liberated, what it is to really live your intentions with authenticity. We can make a lot of mistakes with regards to that. And one of the big mistakes we can make is romanticizing the path and romanticizing our adventure on the path. And so this is about the very first time that I met my first high teacher, Amma, who is also known as the Hugging Saint, very famous and travels the world. She's been on break since COVID, but usually travels the world just hugging people and just creating these atmospheres of love and these atmospheres that are just filled with a certain energy that when you get in her presence, you watch your mind change. You watch things slow down and still for you, or you watch your inclinations change, your intentions change. You get ideas and insights, or meaningful things just tend to really unfold around this woman in an absurd, ridiculous kind of way. And I meet her for the very first time in San Ramon, California, and I just fall head over heels in love. And I'm like, this is it. This is everything I've been looking for. And I was at rock bottom with some things, including cocaine addiction and the death of a love relationship that meant everything to me that I absolutely ruined. And I was just kind of had nothing really holding me in San Francisco, where I was living at the time, except a job that I really didn't care that much about. And so Amma's about to leave the Bay Area and go across country, and so I ask her, can I please leave with you? And she says, no problem. And it literally wasn't a problem. I traveled across country with her with no idea where I was going to stay on any given night, no idea how I was going to get from town to town, and I was just going to figure it out, and it was literally no problem. And so I go back and I quit my job and I sort out my worldly affairs, and I'm determined to meet up with Amma's tour. The next location that it makes sense for me to rendezvous with the tour was Chicago, Illinois, which meant that I had to take a 3-day Greyhound bus ride, because that was all I could afford, to catch up with the tour. Now, if you have ever been on a multi-day Greyhound voyage, then you know it is gnarly. You ain't gonna shower. You're only gonna use the gnarliest of restrooms. You are going to sit next to whoever, and then that whoever is going to change over at any given moment randomly throughout the trip, and it's like roulette, really. And you're not sleeping because you're sitting up, and you're, again, next to just random folks, and it could be somebody really cool and you could have a really cool conversation, or it could be somebody really sketchy, And so I had lived in an ashram before, and I knew enough to identify this as a spiritually ascetic, a very renounced situation, a situation of, the Sanskrit word is tapasya, which means like the fire of discipline. and you want tapasya in your life if you're a yogi. And so that I just embraced it and said, yeah, this is a spiritually high situation that I've entered into, and I'm being so good right now. I am such a dope practitioner right now. I'm really doing this thing, man. And in fact, I'm going to maximize the specialness of this situation by chanting the 100,000 names of the Holy Mother, this Sanskrit text that takes like an hour and 45 minutes to recite. And it's these complex mantras like Om Parashaktiye Namaha, except way more syllables than that, things you can't even pronunciate on your first, second, third, 100th round. And I decided I'm going to chant this text for 3 days as an act of renunciation and spiritual fire for Amma, and I do, and I get on the bus and I'm doing spiritual practice for 3 days on the bus, and I'm feeling very holy, very renounced, and on day number 3 I'm kind of like salivating and just thinking like, oh man, when Amma gets a look at me, you know, she knows everything, and she's gonna see the energy that I'm holding from doing all these practices, you know, in this fashion and all this tapasya, and she's going to take one look at me and she's gonna know that, you know, I'm it. And so I pull up to her center, or to her program rather, which isn't happening at a center. It's happening in the convention center at the embassy suites or some shit. And and I already had kind of an upturned nose about that. And we are doing this thing that we did where we'd gather around the door that she was about to arrive through, and we would gather around and we would chant this prayer that's basically saying, I pledge obeisance to Amma, and Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, and we would just chant that in unison around her, and which would get very, you know, beautiful and trance-inducing and lovely, and we're just standing there and we're chanting Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, except I'm around some devotees from the Midwest, and I'm thinking to myself, they haven't been in an ashram like I have, and it shows, because I'm chanting Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, and they're chanting Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, and I am thinking, let me show them how it's done. So I get loud, Om Amrite Shwariye Namaha, right? And I'm chanting like this for some time, probably at a puffed up chest, I don't even know. And soon enough, I feel an index finger like this push my hands down. My hands are in Anjali Mudra and prayer palms, and somebody just says, no, dude. I open my eyes, and walking past me just then is this guy, Swami Ramakrishna, in his long gray hair and his orange robe, and he's like Amma's number 2 guy. And he had just walked by me, saw the spiritual airs I was putting on, and with one finger just said, no, checked me. And the thought in my head, though, was, who does he think he is? He doesn't see what like Amma sees. When Amma sees me, she's going to set the record straight. So I continue my boisterous chanting. Amma shows up. We all take our seats. I sit down next to somebody who looks at me and says, hey, I think you were in California. Do you need a place to stay tonight? Which I absolutely did. And I was like, see, that's a sign. Amma knows I'm the one. So the program rolls on, and the way an Amma program works is eventually you go up and you get a hug from her, which is called darshan, and after darshan, you know, which is beautiful, you to get to hug an enlightened being. This isn't done in India. This is very radical in Indian culture, to actually get to touch and interact in a physical way with an enlightened being, and she just hugs you and she whispers mantras into your ear, and she'll call you her darling son or her darling daughter, or chant Om Namah Shivaya into your ears, and all kinds of things. And it's a very special blessing to get to receive her energy in this way. And people, I mean, I've seen people faint, I've seen all kinds of things. I've had all kinds of realizations and what have you after darshan. I've also seen people experience nothing, so think what you want of that. But then after darshan, she hands you a Hershey's Kiss and a rose petal, which is kind of corny, right? She gets a hug and a kiss. And so I go up for my darshan, get the hug. She hands me my Hershey's Kiss and my rose petal, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but she hands it to me, and then I looked, and then it was gone. And I must have dropped it. But I look, and it was gone, and I take a cursory look around me, and I don't see it anywhere, and I literally shoved my hands back in her face. Just shoved my hands back in her face with the same spiritual air of like, I'm special, I deserve things. And Amma sees this, and she puts her index finger in my palms. She does the Indian head wobble. She says something in Malayalam, her native tongue, that I do not understand, and then cocks her head back in uproarious laughter, which, if you've ever been to an AMA program, you know that like all eyes are on her. And when she laughs, it doesn't matter if you know what she's laughing at, everyone laughs. Because it's just like this energy that spreads. And so she, everybody laughs. As far as I was concerned, the entire auditorium of like 600, 700, 800 people laughed along with her. And then she puts another Hershey's Kiss in my hand and waves me off. I'm shattered. I'm absolutely shattered. She did not recognize how special I was. And in fact, she made fun of me. She made fun of me. She broke me down right as I was in this moment of spiritual aggression, really, of this aggressive form of pride and entitlement, probably some whiteness, maleness mixed in with that. And she just like Swami Ramakrishna, with one index finger, checked me. I broke down and just thought, I want to go home. What am I doing? Why am I here? I hate this. I hate everything. I hate myself. I hate her. I want to go home. I don't even have a home anymore. I don't have enough money to go back home. I have nothing. I've given it all up to be here, and she's gonna fucking make fun of me? Oh my God. And I walk out into the parking lot and I bum cigarette after cigarette off of people, because this is how spiritually renounced I am at this point. And I'm just like chain smoking. I go to the dessert table and I buy like as much rice pudding and gulab jamun that I could afford. And I fucking pound sugar because I'm so upset. And then I see some devotees that are also smoking right by the door. And I go up and I bum a cigarette off of them. And I'm just, it's on my face. And this woman says to me, "What is wrong? You seem really out of sorts right now. What's going on with you, dude?" And I tell her the story. Listen, I came here, I chanted for 3 days. I didn't shower, whatever. And, you know, index finger, head wobble, laugh, humiliation, WTF. And this woman goes, "Oh, I see now. Amma loves you. She really likes you. Oh, you thought it was going to be all butterflies and rainbows because that's how it was at the ashram back home. But, you know, that's how the guru gets you. But, like, the thing is your ego has to be cut down a little bit. Your pride has to be smashed a little bit. And, you know, that's the real love, is that she's actually doing you a service by tearing you down a bit. Because it's what's going to help you to become humble so that you can receive the higher teachings." And it's just like, come on. Okay, that makes sense in terms of, you know, what I know about the spiritual path and how I'm acting here. But I'm just so upset. I'm mad and I just can't get past it. I'm just really stuck. I've come down a bit from like crisis moment. I'm really stuck though. I'm just thinking about this. Yeah, she's right. She's right. I was putting on airs. She's right. I was really full of myself there. And, you know, even Swami Ramakrishna doing this wasn't enough to cut through that. I came at her in this wrong way, in this arrogant, entitled, toxic kind of way. And that's not the way to comport oneself on this path at all. That's not how it's done. And she's right. But I'm still furious because I've given everything to be here, and I want nothing to do with the whole situation, and I also have nowhere to go, which is something that will happen in this spiritual life so much. You will just be left stranded with yourself in some situations. Nowhere to go, no way to compensate. I'd already smoked all the cigarettes I could stand. I'd already eaten all the sugar my body could take. I had nothing left. And I just had to go and be with it. And so I found a little corner in the hall where no one was sitting. And I went and I sat there and I closed my eyes. And I began chanting my mantra and working with the emotions and looking at the situation and just so happy to finally be alone and away from everything. Then Amma's number one guy, who they call Big Swami, rolls up and sits right next to me. There's a million chairs, empty chairs around me. He sits right next to me, and there's all these Indian women that are like just following him around and just carrying on in Hindi or Malayalam with him, and asking questions, and it's this very like a situation with a lot of veneration to it, and I'm just absolutely annoyed all over again. Fucking Jesus fucking Christ, can you people leave me alone? And finally, all the venerating folks, the sycophants, depart, and I'm sitting there smelling like an ashtray, smelling like Marlboro Reds, next to Almost Number One, and we're just sitting there. My eyes are still closed. I'm pissed. And finally, I just open my eyes, and I look over at him, and I said, Big Swami, do you ever get mad at Amma? And he looks at me and he goes, every day. Every day, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? And then I just said thank you and closed my eyes and went inside. I think the concluding thing to say here is we want this path to be rainbows and butterflies. And there are rainbows and butterflies. There is goodness. There is rapture. There's expansive love. There's healing. There's transformation that we never even imagined possible. That is afoot here. That's absolutely true. And it's also true that, there are things in us that have to be broken down. There's conditioning that has to be broken down. There's internalized bigotry and internalized oppression in us, internalized marginalization in us. There's internalized capitalism in us. There's mistaken ideas. There's romanticism about the path. There's spiritual materialism and coming at this thing with ego and a big sense of grandiosity and narcissism, or the other evil, perhaps the bigger evil, which is coming in feeling like we're not worthy of any of this and like we don't have what it takes. And there's all these things that have to be addressed in us in order for the heart to be made available. And if you're like how I was, I had grown very hard-hearted due to the trauma. Sharon Salzberg says, sometimes, our spiritual practice, it's like planting seeds, but sometimes you've got to prepare the soil. And sometimes the soil is actually stone, and the stone has to be ground down first before that soil, it can be made into soil, before that soil can be fertilized, and before the seed can be planted and actually take root and bear fruit. And I was dealing with a rock inside, and I had all these ridiculous ideas about basically how I was going to go around that situation and just put on a different mask and do my practice like that. And this was a kind of severe example that I've had a therapist, I told this story to a therapist who said that was really fucked up what happened actually. I don't agree with that style, but it's also very Indian. It's a very Indian style of guru culture teaching. And it's something that I needed to have happen to me. And I'm sitting here as the one that it happened to. And I'm saying, no, this is really good. This is really good. In hindsight, in the moment, no, it was terrible. But in hindsight, I'm so glad that it happened this way because it taught me how precious humility is. And I don't think, given how hard-hearted and hard-headed I was, I could have been shown. really any other way, at least not so efficiently, so quickly in a night, you know? And absolutely life-changing. And the other piece is we're allowed to be mad. You're allowed to be mad at the divine, at whatever, concept you relate to life through, at life itself, at the path, at the practices, at the teacher, no matter how high, no matter who it is. I believe that there's no such thing as blasphemy. That there's, first of all, if something is true, then it will stand up to questioning, and it will stand up to even you trying to humiliate it. I was in an advanced teacher training with Jack Kornfield several summers ago, and a bunch of questions came up about, what about the modern mindfulness movement and these people who are corrupting the Dharma, and they're really watering down the practice. They're watering down the Dharma by, these 5-minute meditations and these, Buddhist light teachings that are all over Instagram. And what do? We must protect the Dharma. And Jack Kornfield says the Dharma could take care of itself. If you look at the history of Buddhism throughout time and throughout so many different cultures, then you will see that the Buddhist teachings have been taken mistakenly over and over again. In fact, that's most of Buddhism, actually, is a miscomprehension of what the teachings are, what they mean, what they're for, what their potential is, what their capacity is, the way that they relate to trauma, quite frankly, which is a book that I'm writing right now. The Dharma can take care of itself. The Dharma can preserve itself. It doesn't need you, So no blasphemy either. No fear of getting upset and having moments of resenting this stuff for being so difficult at times, for asking so much of us at times, In another Amma experience, I was smoking cigarettes again on this bridge outside our ashram in San Ramon a few years later, and I was actually, I believe, now that I think about it, was telling this story to somebody that I had just met, and we were just kind of relating spiritual stories and experiences we'd had on the path, and he said, I once heard a teaching that, if you love your guru, 100 lifetimes to enlightenment. But if you're angry with your guru and you fight with your guru, enlightenment in this lifetime. Why? Because the person who's getting angry at the path is the one who's being honest. Because it's meant to take us all to our edge. If you don't get in over your head, how can you ever find out how tall you can become? If you never go to the edge, how can you ever find out how expansive you're meant to become? Isn't it? So we're meant to be taken to our edge. We're meant to be broken down a little bit. We're meant to be challenged. We're meant to even be insulted by the path. I mean, that's kind of what basic meditation is, isn't it? You sit down to get away from your anxiety, and you find it's right there waiting for you, except you're stranded now, nowhere to go. You sit down to get away from your thoughts. They're right there waiting for you. You hear the instruction, pay attention to the breath. You pay attention to it for a nanosecond before you're distracted. Isn't that how it goes when you first practice? It's insulting. It's insulting. The instructions are a farce. You can't do it. And then the teacher has the gall to sit there and say, gently come back from distraction, while you are saying, what? Get me out of here. This is ridiculous, isn't it? It's like that in the beginning of practice for so many of us, and so many of us, in part because of the coddling of convenience culture and what have you, and our deep sense of entitlement, we flee from the practice because it's that difficult, because we can't do it, because it's insulting, frankly. We flee from the practice, never to return in a lot of cases, because things like this aren't taught. Things like this aren't taught out there, that the spiritual practice is actually supposed to break you down a little bit. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to take you to your edge. Again, how else are you going to grow? We do not grow when we're comfortable. When we are comfortable, we think, oh, I've got it figured out. Now I just got to figure out how to keep it like this forever. Then I'm peace. That doesn't work though. It keeps falling apart on us over and over again. Why? We only ask why when it's falling apart, not when it's easy. Right? A friend of mine, Adriana Limbach, who's a really wonderful meditation teacher, really wonderful author as well, excellent writer. She tells the story of her teacher, Robina Corton, venerable Lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. She's from Australia, and Adriana goes to Robina and says, hey, listen, here's the thing. I'm a meditation teacher, and I'm out there in the marketplace, and I'm a coach, and this is how this is my livelihood. And yet, this is Buddhism. The first noble truth in Buddhism, Buddha's first teaching to leave his mouth is the truth of how suffering is entwined with life. How do you, I'm supposed to market this? I'm supposed to figure out how to attract people to this practice and be authentic to the teachings. And Venerable Robina Corton says, oh, darling, you need to deliver the bad news and do it with enthusiasm. And so that's also part of this story time that I'm sharing here with you. And I didn't plan on saying so much afterwards, but is I'm here to deliver the bad news that this is challenging and it's not all rainbows and butterflies, and to do it with enthusiasm, because here's the other piece, is it's worth it. And you do find expansion, and you do find out how tall you can grow, and you do find out how deep the heart can go, endless really, if you bust down all those rocks and hardened ways that we armor and think that we're keeping ourselves safe. Amma did this for me, and she did it in an atmosphere of love. This is the last thing I'll say, and I'm saying it because it's very important. It was an atmosphere of love. The literal energy in the room was all love. The practitioners in this room, it was all love, it was all support, it was all consciousness, it was all awareness. It was a very healthy situation. That is the way that these sorts of checks should be made, in an atmosphere, in a container of love, right? There was no aggression. Nobody yelled at me. Nobody pushed me around. Nobody called me names even. They just reflected back to me how absurd I was being in a way that I found insulting, because frankly, the way I was being was insulting. And, but that needs to be said, that this wasn't done in an aggressive manner, and it was done in an atmosphere of love. It was done in an atmosphere of love. Everything that I'm talking about here, everything that we have to work on, my friends, all the engagement in the world that we need to, all the practices that we need to apply to ourselves, and all the ways in which we need to engage in the path, and this is where we can go to a parts work, an IFS kind of place. It has to be done in the spirit of self-energy, right? It has to be done with self-energy present. If self-energy is present, so many things can move in leaps and bounds. If no self-energy is present, chances are we're going to reenact aggression, traumatic conditioning, and all kinds of things in a repetitive, cyclical kind of way. But the energy of self, with a capital S, changes everything. So thank you so much for listening. I hope, again, you got something from this. At the very least, a laugh at my expense. And I hope to tell you more stories soon. See ya.